John Gibson, my friend, we've done work together. We've probably had problems that we've had to deal with each other. I'm sure that's what happens if you know somebody long enough. Head of TPO channel for Flagstar. Thanks for coming on the walk this morning. Why don't we take a couple minutes and just describe you and your role today, kind of the footprint at Flagstar. Obviously, when we do this, it's not a commercial for anybody, neither you or the company, but to give some context, get a little intro into just your overall role at the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, great to be here with you, right? On the walk. I know, you and I did a lot of work together back in the day at a previous life in a previous company. So I think we've kind of been through the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, right? Of all the good and bad. Yeah, of all the good and bad that goes along with that, right?
That's right.
So I've been over at Flagstar now. I've been here 18 months. To your point, I run anything and all things third-party origination. So anywhere from broker up to the highest, most sophisticated correspondent, delegated, bulk client, you name it. I kind of run that from a Salesforce perspective and run sales for the company and footprint, right, nationwide, where there's no area that we don't call on and support the third-party origination community. We try to wake up every day and do the best we possibly can do.
How many, from a org chart perspective, how many people do you support?
Yeah, so in total, I have 58 account executives. I got 4 regional sales managers, we call them, that manage those AEs. And then there's a couple other people that report to me directly, kind of like on some specialty stuff like the construction lending program and stuff like that. So all in, I probably got about 65, 70 people at Flagstar that I'm directly responsible for.
And then if you look at the brokers and the bankers that you support from there, I mean, that's an incredible multiple of even that number.
Oh God, yeah. Like if you just look at broker as one of the 4 delivery types that we do business with, right? I think we're running at about 1,600 mortgage broker shops approved. And if you think on average, there's 3 people in those organizations per organization that can actually originate a loan. You're talking 4,800 loan officers on any given moment that we're supporting, and then throw in their support staff, right, which do a lot of the heavy lifting from the processing and closing side of the house. Just in the broker channel alone, we're probably supporting, upwards of 6,000 people, right, throughout the country, and then layer on non-delegated, delegated, and bulk, and it's a huge number. It's a great responsibility.
Yeah, and I wanted to get that out because I think that there's context to that, right? Like when we talk about even a wholesale account executive or a loan officer for that matter, the manager may not be in their title, but what they're doing on a daily basis is they are managing people, and they're managing emotions, and they're managing expectations. And I wanted to talk through that context because you put all that together, especially in a year like 2020, where although the business may have been hot, emotions were also running very hot, which for everybody made it a wild year to manage. And I want to come back to that. Back me up though to when you got started in this industry and you weren't managing anything other than building whatever it is you were attempting to build in the beginning. What I know I think you have a finance degree, so you had some connection when you were in college, but how did you end up in banking and mortgage banking? And what were those first several years? What did they look like and feel like?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So you're right. I graduated from Drexel up in Philadelphia with a finance degree. And if you know Drexel, great university, co-op program. They're all 5-year programs. So your middle 3 years, you go to school for 6 months and you work in your trade for 6 months. And it was really an eye-opening experience because I started off as an engineer major. So I was like a architectural engineer, and my freshman year got through all the classes, got to my first co-op. It was awesome, but I realized real quick, like, wow, this is never what I could do for a living. Like, that's just not me.
What was it specifically? Was there something that made you just feel like it wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I mean, you know me, and maybe some of the people that'll see this know me. It's something that fit my personality, right? Like a desk job, 9 to 5, like, I don't know, not being in control of your own destiny from a standpoint of your earning potential, so to speak.
Yep.
That was just not something that fit me. And look, I'll be honest with you, physics was never my strong suit. So like when I got down to like exams and things like that, I always struggled with physics. It's pretty concept that you need to be an engineer of some sort. So
For sure.
it just didn't make sense to me. So I switched to finance, and then I actually worked on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange my last 2 years of the co-op program, which there would be like your pre-junior and your junior year.
Okay.
And then even my senior year, I still worked for them part-time in between classes. So loved the concept, loved working with on the exchange, the finance, the money, everything associated with it. And quite honestly, I stumbled on the mortgage industry. I graduated in 95.
Okay.
And it might have been 94. It's been so long, 94, 95. I graduated, and a bunch of my buddies that I grew up with, we grew up in South Jersey. We always had shore house for the summer. I was literally hanging out at my shore house that we had rented. And, you know, this is 95, right? So you had actual physical resumes that you would hand people. I had a bunch of them in my trunk, and my one buddy to this day, who we are still tight. He's my he was a wrestler. I was a basketball player. We were tight. He literally is my finance guy now, right? So all my investments go through him. His brother-in-law came down and partied with us, and he was an area manager for a mortgage company.
Huh.
And literally hit it off with him that weekend, gave him my resume. And within probably a month, I had been interviewed by multiple people at the company and started in the industry as a retail loan officer. So I was literally on the street selling loans, and that's how I got started.
And so was this a big company, a small company?
It was a nationwide. World Savings, Golden West Financial was the parent company. World Savings or World Mortgage was the mortgage company. And I started off as a retail rep for them for about a year and a half. I got the opportunity to then become a wholesale account executive about a year and a half in. I did that for about 2 years, and then I got offered a role to, go into management. And basically, after the first 3 years of my career being on the street, I went right into management. I've been in management ever since.
Were there moments along the way in the first 3 to 5 years where you had these, I kind of call them turn the corner moments, where you either turn the corner or you don't turn the corner? You have to make a decision. But were there moments where you thought, man, what am I doing? I'm not good at this, or the market's not fair, or these other people are getting leads that I'm not getting? Can you think back to moments like that? And then what was it that caused you to turn the corner?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is a pivotal moment I point to in my career when I was that retail loan officer. To your point, I came out, I went through their training program. I was struggling it was a 5-year school, right? So I graduated when I was 23, coming out of college. You're on your own, you're living with a bunch of buddies. Yeah, you're starting your career. And this looks great. It's sales. Hey, commissions were great if you could close loans, right? Like at the end of the day, it's on you.
Right.
And about a year into my career at that company, I worked for World all the way until the end. So I was there for a good 16, 17 years. I was going to get let go. They were going to fire me. So I was about a year into the industry.
This just for lack of production? Was there something specific?
Lack of production, right? Like anything, you're looking for results. Look, I'll be honest. I probably didn't have the greatest work ethic for a 23-year-old coming out of college who still wanted to party.
Living in resumes in the trunk, but you also had the golf clubs and the surfboard, whatever else.
Living in Westchester, Pennsylvania, right? Like college town, not where I went, but that's where kind of I moved to when I was working for this company. Living with a fraternity brother and one of my best friends that I grew up with, like, I don't know, man, like, you kind of have those cross moments. But the funny thing is I was really good at the job. Like when we went away to like basic sales training, we'd have to give up and give presentations. We'd have contests and we'd have like a flip chart stand. And I'll never forget two things. we were at a advanced sales class, which you did after 6 months of being there. We were in the Poconos of all places up in Philly. And Dave Stevens, who a lot of people in the industry know, I consider him to be, I joke around, I say I'm part of the Dave Stevens coaching tree, like the Bill Walsh and the Mike Holmgren and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Dave was like, I was a rep. There was a manager that managed me, another manager, and then Dave, right? And he kind of ran the whole organization where we were located. And I'll never forget, I was giving the presentation, the flip chart presentation in front of the group, and I ended up winning. And I remember sitting down, and Dave was kind of in the back with a bunch of the other managers. And he basically said something that has stuck with me to this day, which was, hey, the kid's got all the talent. He's just not working. Like, he's literally not working, because if you put him in front of somebody, he's going to be able to sell and be able to do what he needed to do. And he's right. And there was that aha moment that, like, hey, this guy sees something in me. And there was that. And then in the same breath, the guy that I reported to directly, his name's Ron Wibag, great guy, still in the industry. Mm-hmm. He was my direct manager. And, he had some really good heart-to-heart conversations with me as a manager, which is like, hey, man, like, we're going to put you on this performance improvement plan. And most people think it's just inevitable that we're going to fire you in a month. And it might be that way. He's like, I want to be honest with you. He's like, but it's on you. He's like, so if you want to do the things that you need to do to be successful, I'll support you, and we'll do them together. And dude, he put me on things like back then, like call logs. I had to call him in the morning, had to go through what my day was like, had to touch base with him at the end of the day, had to turn in reports, which most people think like, what a pain in the ass, right? But those two moments in my career have completely turned around where the trajectory of my career was going. And I'll never forget Dave saying that in the meeting, and Ron Wibag actually sitting me down, having that honest moment, hard conversation, saying, look, man, you got all the talent in the world. You're just not working. And,
right.
And at the end of the day, if you're not willing to do the job, that's fine, but stop wasting our time, right? And there was that come to Jesus moment. And look, my career's turned out pretty good since then.
Well, I mean, such a good example of it. Just one side isn't enough. You can be the smartest guy in the room, but if you're not putting in the energy or the effort, where's that going to go? You can also be the hardest working person in the room, but if you don't have the tools and resources around you and the wherewithal to gain the knowledge that's necessary to at least keep you in the game, well, then that's not going to work as well either. Fast forward now. So, you were integral in the growth of Caliber prior to Flagstar. You obviously made the move to Flagstar, which was also already a, well-respected, established company. The takeaways from those moments, are there things that you find you're constantly incorporating in your manager style, the way that you support other people, that goes back to those moments? And then I've got to assume, now that you're on the other side and you've been on the other side for a while, you must have moments where you have similar conversations and there's no positive result that comes from it. Like, I'm curious to kind of hear stories maybe that you've had of both how it works out positively and then how sometimes it doesn't work out so positively, and also how you internalize some of those things as you go through.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that, because I've tried to take those moments that I call defining moments for my career, and I hate using the word pay it forward, right? But like, those are things that are grounded in me. And for people that know me, I really look at it as like, my job is to work for my people, right? Like, the concept of work charts drives me crazy, because you put a leader at the top and they don't drive the revenue for the company, right? They should always be inverted. I work for my sales force and my AEs, and that's kind of been my philosophy anywhere I've ever been. But yeah, I mean, look, the things I took away from that were just the raw honesty and the sincerity, right? Like, I think a lot of times we get caught up in stuff as managers that, you're just not as honest with your people as you should be. You try to spin things, and that's just never been my approach because of those defining moments. So yeah, I would say, like, if you think it through, right, there's definitely a couple moments. Like, I'll give you an example of one that I think is a positive moment, and I'll circle back to one that maybe didn't work out so good, right? But a guy that you and I both know well, Dave Hendrickson, right? In the industry, worked for me at World Savings. And if you look at Dave, like when I at World Savings, one thing we did really well is we interjected leaders into organizations to kind of shake things up and to help grow. So when I was at World, I started off in just outside of Philly, moved to Northern Virginia, moved to Boston, moved back to Northern Virginia, lived in Chicago for 8 years. And that's where I met Dave. And then when it kind of all ended with the merger and then the acquisition and everything that took place, I came back to Virginia. But Dave's a perfect example. I would tell you, I don't know if he would admit this or not, but again, similar, young, out of college. He started off in the appraisal department at World because we had our own in-house appraisal department. And then he moved into sales. And I remember meeting him when I first moved out there. And I just was like, holy shit, this kid is just like me. Like, loves sports, outgoing, great personality, but nobody's really given the kid any direction, right? And it actually felt similar to my career. And look, Dave had it in him the entire way. A lot of times I think what my job is as a manager is to just show people that they really have the talent. They just need to understand it and then realize it. And I love Dave. He's like a brother. He gives me a lot of credit for his career, and I throw it right back at him saying, hey, man, I really didn't do anything. All I did was I was honest with you throughout the way of your evolution. And I just kind of showed you, like, look, if you do it like this and you focus on these things and this work ethic, it will pay off for you in spades. So Dave's an example of, the boss that I worked for is like, he's a young kid. Look at him. Look at how he's dressed. Look at his shoes. Like, he's a goofball. Like, he's never going to be successful. Don't waste your time. And look, Dave is somebody I hold in high regard in this industry. He did some really good things for us at World Savings. We promoted him. We promoted him into different levels there. And I'm a big fan of Dave and his career. And the thing that I love about the job that I do is there's intrinsic value for me, right? Not because Dave is successful at what he does, but because I see him and his wife were in our wedding. When me and my wife got married, they are friends of ours, but I see what he's done, what he's been able to accomplish, but more, what does that mean to his family, to his 3 daughters and his son and his wife? And then to see that Dave's taking that same kind of approach and doing the same thing with his people. There's probably 15 examples I could tell you that he shared with me that I laugh all the time going, man, you just did the same thing I did for you. You're just showing them the way, right? So to me, that's the type of stuff. But it goes back to that point, Eric, which is, man, like, I was goofing off. I wasn't taking it serious. And it ended up being the best moments in my life that those guys had with me. And it was a great company, and I started a great career. So that's a one positive, right? I look at somebody like Dave Hendrickson, who was kind of on that same path, and go, hey, man, let's have a conversation. This is what you need to do.
Right.
And like I said, he gives me way too much credit. He always had the ability. He just wasn't realizing it. He needed somebody to be a coach. And that's what I did.
Well, I think one of the things that, and of course, I know Dave well also. Yeah. For those that might be listening that don't know Dave Hendrickson, Dave is a wildly successful divisional manager for a retail mortgage banker and he's in the Midwest, but he's got a presence in markets throughout the United States. And it's a very self-contained division where they all have relationships. They all know each other's families. They fight, but they come out of the room with some common goal after that fight. And I think one of the things that you guys probably share, and something I say a lot, and that is, do you want credit or do you want to be successful? Because it's not always the same thing. There's people that fight for credit and they think that success is somehow going to be tied inside of that formula. Yeah. And it's what really is our ultimate goal here. And I think you and Dave both have done a great job of whether either identifying that or it just comes naturally. But it takes two. There has to be someone that's willing to say something that could be painful to the other person. And the person that does it, you or John or Dave Stevens, as an example, have to be willing to know that what you get back might not be positive. It might be negative, and it may then also make you question your own ability to lead and manage. So I'm curious, like, I'm assuming you've had some experiences like that as well, where you knew someone could be successful. You gave them the tough love that they probably needed at the moment. But in that moment, it might have come back to bite you. Maybe they left you, they joined another company, they disagreed. When those moments happen, is it easy for you to handle? Do you brush that stuff off? Or how do you manage your own emotions when you don't see someone take that advice?
Yeah, like when that happens, and it's happened. I mean, just being in management for as long as I have, right, at various levels, the last, probably, I mean, God, it's going on almost 2 years here at Caliber, is there for quite some time. And then the last 4 or 5 years at World Savings, I've pretty much been at this level that I'm at now.
Right.
But in between that, right, running branches, running regions, all that stuff. There's definitely been a lot of what I call coaching sessions. And there's just as many as you could look at the positives and point to the successes. There's probably equally just as many that didn't work out. Right. And I think I struggle with it, the emotion of it, right? Because I think you've said something that's true, right? It takes two to tango, right? Like, I can sit down with you and I can care and I can show the understanding and I can walk you through how we get to where we need to get you. But then at some point, the individual has to want that too, right? It's hard for me to want it more for them than they actually want it, because I can't physically do the job for them, right? Like that's impossible. But when you talk about the emotions of it, yeah, there's, when you put that time and energy into it and you really believe in the person and you believe in their ability, and then it doesn't work out, I try not to take things personal in this industry, because I think when it becomes personal, it like that derails you and your focus and how you view things. But there's part of me that when that's happened, I feel like I've let that individual down somehow, right? Like, not that they've let me down. It's more of, I didn't do enough. Like, yeah, I started them on the path, but man, I could have done it. How could I have done it differently? How could I have structured it differently? How could I have said it differently? Because maybe the way I was doing it and delivering it wasn't resonating with them or connecting. So I've always tried to internalize those moments into what could I have done different as their mentor, coach, manager, so that they wouldn't have had to leave and then go do this or get out of the industry, that type of stuff. So for me, those are always internalizing moments that says, where did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? How should I have functioned differently? And I've learned from those moments too.
So thinking ahead, the industry I still am a believer that our industry, the mortgage industry, although it's embracing and innovating from a technology perspective, that the industry is still behind other industries.
Absolutely.
However, we've been going in this direction for quite a while now. Do you envision a future where there's so much technology supporting processes that this becomes more of a commodity? And you could already make an argument that it's a commodity, but the way that we get to the ultimate commodity, meaning I own it, I'm the end user, I own a home, and that mortgage is an asset, or the home is an asset at some level. There's a commodity. But how I get to that commodity is still through trusted advisors and relationships and people that can lead me in the right direction. And with that, those trusted advisors are trusted advisors because they've had leadership that have coached them the way that you just described. Do you have any concern that in the near future, at some level, technology somehow starts to replace some of that and we lose the nuance of all those things that you just described?
So it's a good question.
Well, let me throw one other thing into your brain, because where my head is even on that is, not just that it impacts your ability to do what you just described, but the trickle down effect, for lack of a better term, in how that then meets the end user, the consumer, or even the referral partner.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my head is on that question as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good points in there. Look, I think if people aren't embracing technology and the impact that it's going to have in this industry, they're going to be left behind, and left behind quickly. Now, what I will tell you is, pre-pandemic, I think this industry was being dragged and fighting all along the way. And we were probably still a good 5 years away from where I think the real, impact of technology was going to be seen and felt. COVID changed that a little bit, right? Like, everybody working from home, everybody working remotely. Look, just from a third party perspective, right? Like, there are a couple companies out there that really don't have AEs on the street, right? They centralize it and they do it in-house. But for the most part, 95% of the companies out there have the AEs, local experts in the marketplace with their business partner, and they understand exactly those marketplaces, right? Those individuals, through the pandemic, they were all forced to do business differently than they've ever done before. Look at what we're doing right now on a Zoom call, right? Or a WebEx call, or a Microsoft Meetings, or keeping certain all the ones that are out there. Never did that before. Not to this degree, not for over a year, right?
That's right.
Not to this scale. So we figured out how to embrace it. You start looking at like e-closings and RONs and all those things. That was light years away from being part of this industry as the norm. And the pandemic really condensed a lot of companies' thinkings on that. Hell, in some instances, states, municipalities, counties, things like that, with laws on the books. A lot of that stuff's changing, right? So I think it's coming. I think it's coming probably faster than people think, just because of the rapidness of how things have transpired over the last year to year and a half. But there is always, in my mind, going to be something said for the trusted advisor, the local expert, the person that I need to talk to, whether I'm the consumer and I'm trying to get a mortgage, or whether I'm the loan officer doing the mortgage. I mean, look at it now, right? Look at like how many people, I saw some statistics the other day. It's like 88% of the people, when they go to buy a home, are doing all the research online on their own, but then they're still using a real estate agent, right? Same thing on the mortgage broker side, or the mortgage loan officer side. There's all these statistics of, sites that are being looked at for mortgages and interest rates and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they're reaching out to the retail loan officer at the bank, the mortgage broker in the marketplace, the LO that works for a correspondent lender that closes loans in their own name, right? So while I personally believe, and this isn't, this is just John Gibson, not representative of anything else except for my own opinion, I do think the landscape of how a loan gets originated, not only from a technology standpoint, but what like a retail loan officer looks like in the future and how that's going to be, I think that's going to dramatically change. I really do. And I think it's going to have to, right? I think we're going to have to evolve.
Well, I mean, you've got speed, you've got efficiencies, you've got ability to manage through the regulatory environment more effectively. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be taken out of the hands of a human being. We all agree with that. However, I think this is both something that, and I say I think this only because I talk to brilliant people like you, right? All the time. I think from learning from others that there is a healthy balance on what the technology platforms need a solution for, as well as what the end user is utilizing. And that is that balance between the static and the dynamic. The static that exists inside of AI at some level, or machine learning inside of a technology platform, and then the dynamic of a human being. What I can't quite figure out, though, is that if we remove more and more of some of the processes and put it in the hands of a technology platform, eventually maybe there's actually a robot with hands that's handling that technology.
Right.
But then we lose the nuance of all the other things that actually maybe does create value for the consumer, because we've lost the, it's like you've got a daughter, I think. I've got 2 boys, I've got 2 sons, and their brains are wired differently than mine because of the technology that they've been attached to so much. So
God,
don't we rewire the trusted advisor as well if there's that much more technology? And I'm just yapping out loud, man, because I think there's got to be that healthy balance between the two, or else we lose something really important.
There has to be the healthy balance. And one of the things you're talking about, right? Like, go back to the end user, right? The consumer, which you had mentioned that earlier. We were kind of talking about that. I do think when it comes to the home buying process, right? Understanding, what a mortgage is, how I qualify, what I need for a down payment, everything associated with getting a mortgage, as well as finding a home, real estate agent, all those things. I do think that they're becoming more and more educated and more savvy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example, right? And again, this isn't anything other than something that I've seen, and I think they're doing an excellent job at this. But like Brian View and the guys over at FinLocker, right? Like that tool that they are continuing to develop and continuing to place into the marketplace in the hands of potential homeowners, whether it be today or a year now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, that's educating the potential future homeowner around things like managing their credit, assets, how to qualify, how underwriting works, right? Looking at your income versus your assets, your DTI and all that stuff. So if I'm a trusted advisor in the marketplace as a loan officer, I need to be able to adjust and meet my clients where they're going to be, right? And if clients are using things like a FinLocker, meaning a borrower, I need to understand, like, how do I reach out? How do I, A, partner with somebody like that? But then B, how do I make sure that I'm utilizing those tools and services and I'm up to speed with that the borrower's being able to utilize? So I think things like that, to your point, like staying in touch with the trends and where the borrowers are getting information from, at least from a technology perspective. And there's a couple of ones out there. Brian just comes to mind because I replaced him at Flagstar, and I've seen their product, and it's slick. Like, they're doing a really good job with it, and they're partnering with a lot of brokers and correspondent lenders, the agencies. Like, they're really doing some good work over there. But to your point, like, at some point, I don't care how educated of a consumer you are, and I don't care how much technology is injected into the overall, what I call, manufacturing process, right? From start to finish.
Right.
It's amazing. It's never not going to be one of your biggest financial decisions when you actually look at it, right? The amount of money you're putting into it, the interest that you're going to pay for the period of time that you're there. Look at me, like I'm redoing my deck right now. There's money that I'm investing into my property. It's not just about the transaction and the closing and the payments. It's everything else that goes associated with being a homeowner. It's going to be your biggest financial decision. You still want that trusted advisor with that knowledge and expertise to be able to advise you through that process, even if that advice and how you give it to them may be different in the future because of the technology piece.
Yeah, such a great point. I was reading an article recently, had nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. It was talking more about social media companies and their responsibilities and their communication. But there was a quote that came out about how those platforms have replaced the town hall. And the difference, with the town hall was you had a group of people face to face having conversations, debating topics, and witnessing how certain things actually physically and emotionally impacted a human being, versus having a technology platform essentially feed you the answers. And what I would have a hard time picturing is that the mortgage industry as a ecosystem is replaced by technology. I mean, there's that town hall need that, I had somebody tell me a long time ago, this was a great area manager down south, super successful guy, led a super successful team. He was a good old country boy, liked to hunt on the weekends, drove a big old truck, tough guy. Yeah. And there was a moment where I told him what I thought he needed to do. And I felt like he trusted me enough to at least just say it, and he could have hung up on me. But he made a comment, and that was, sometimes people just need to be told what to do. And it's kind of like when I bump into my real estate agent that sold me my house that I'm in right now. When I see her, I'm still interested to know what her thoughts are on
Oh
the
yeah.
market right now and our local community. And I don't envision an environment where that's all removed for the majority of the industry. What is your, we've come out of this pandemic, 2020, mortgage companies did well, your originators did well, the account executives did well, but what concerns you the most right now with the current environment?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? Like, it's interesting to me, right? The industry that we're in, when there's chaos and things are going crazy, if you go back over time, those tend to be some of the best years, right? Because of translation to interest rates and everything else. I don't think look, I think there's things that you can sit up at night and be concerned about, right? Like if you look at inventory right now, obviously a huge issue from a standpoint of lack there of it. The buyers are there, but there's lack of inventory. That's concerning, right? As we move forward, you typically then look to like new construction to kind of help with that from a standpoint of new builds, new building permits and new homes being put onto the marketplace. I think I'm concerned a little bit there about one, the cost of supplies, right, and materials.
You're talking about building a deck right now. If you're building it out of wood,
I'm going through it right now, right? Like just seeing, and I thank God that I did it when I started it when I did, which was before Christmas, and the pricing of the materials when we bought everything is dramatically different than today.
Right.
But then even in that example, right? So there's the building materials from a standpoint of a cost, but then there's the standpoint of just the shortage of building materials, right? So I'll give you a real life example. The deck we're building has a 4-season room, right? So it's got the windows that collapse into the ground, but during the wintertime, you can be in there, got heaters and all that nonsense. I chose to insulate the roof and the floor. A lot of people don't do that, but I was like, hey, why not? What the hell? The project was literally delayed 3 weeks because the insulation that I needed for the company that was doing it, I mean, they work with a bunch of builders out here. Like they do a lot of commercial, residential. It was coming from Texas. You had the storms in Texas, right? Everything, it goes down the chain, right? So we were 3 weeks delayed waiting on simply that. So that worries me a little bit in regards to inventory. Obviously, you need the resale market, but you need a good injection of the new construction, from builders. And I worry about the cost of materials, what that looks like going forward with how they write their contracts, right? We're already starting to see some contracts where it's, here's my agreed upon price, and then you're going to pay cost above and beyond that if they escalate, right? Based off the materials. So I worry a little bit about how that impacts the market. Look, obviously, I think like anything else, rates are going to tick up. I think the overall size of the market is probably going to shrink over the next, 2 to 3 years. We're not going to have a 4 trillion plus market again this year. I think, some of the forecasts are looking more like the mid threes, which is still
a heck of a healthy market.
I mean, dude, if you think about it, a 4 trillion plus market followed up by a 3+ trillion market, go back over time, that hasn't happened too often.
Right.
So there's still a lot of opportunity. I'm optimistic. I always think, at the end of the day, home ownership is something that continues to thrive, whether you need to refinance or purchase. I do worry a little bit about, just as an industry, obviously everybody was in growth mode last year from a hiring perspective. So at some point that table flips, right? If the volume's not coming in at the levels it was, you compress margins first, right? To make a little less money per transaction and then go do more volume. That space gets extremely competitive. And then if that doesn't work, the next thing becomes, okay, now we need to look at other expenses, right? And that usually translates to people.
Right.
So that worries me a little bit as we start to go through that cycle. Are we back in that mode where, at some point, third quarter, fourth quarter, do you start as an industry, start managing more, I don't say tighter, but obviously shifting that focus to, okay, here's the market. This is where we're going to be. Here's the revenue. Now we have to match our expenses to that. So I worry what that looks like for some people moving forward, not, at Flagstar specifically, but just in the marketplace in general.
Right.
I think those are a couple of things that worry me.
Did you find yourself spending a lot of time in 2020 or even the last several months um, playing armchair psychologist with a lot of your I mean, I can only imagine any on a small level, any company in any industry coming out, in 2020, coming out of 2020. Our industry was awfully unique though, man. There was a lot of complaining, no time to spend with your family. Nobody could go on vacation anyway, because nobody was traveling for the majority of the year. However, many people were making 3, 4, 5, 6x what they had ever made in their life. So it's a weird balance of complaining and sometimes internal fighting between sales and operations.
Yeah.
How are there some tricks and tips that you found have worked for you when you're managing some of those communication, some of that communication, especially on the sales side?
Yeah. And it's a great topic, man. Cause you're right. Like if you talk to some operational people, right? Like underwriters, processors, closers, managers of those individuals, they probably had the best year from an earning potential that they've had in a very long time, and in a lot of cases their entire career.
Right.
But it came at a pretty good expense, right? Like we can say like, hey, you weren't going to travel anyway, and look, none of your kids had their sporting events or their dance competitions. Like they weren't in schools, right? Like you weren't driving whatever in rush hour traffic to get to the office, right? So your commute was literally get up, make your coffee, and you're in your office type of thing. But there is a mental state to that when it's almost like you're working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And sure, they got compensated for it, but yeah, I think I think that's something that if you weren't mindful of it in 2020, I think that's a culture that individuals will remember. And at the end of the day, I think that'll come back to haunt some companies that didn't pay attention to that.
Right.
I do think there's that, we always talk about this work-life balance, right? I think that got shifted and skewed a lot in 2020. And I think from a sales perspective, what I tried to do, and look, I can just speak for what we tried to do at Flagstar. I think keeping open lines of communication is huge. We do, even before the pandemic, I host a bi-weekly call with the entire sales force. And I bring in my capital markets group. I bring in my ops leaders. I bring in, the sales support team. And they all have segments in my sales meetings where they're giving updates, they're firing out updates on things, and there's this good back and forth type of communication. So I think if you do that, and look, here's the one thing I've always believed in, right? Like if you're leading your organization correctly, then I believe as a leader supporting not only sales, but ops, because it's a team, right?
Yes.
If those lines of communication are open, then one, I think that's all you can ask for. Two, I think as long as people see that action comes out of that feedback and that communication, then your voice is being heard, right? Number one. Number two, you can see if the company cares and they're taking action. So I say all the time, like, look, I want to hear it. I want the feedback. I want your partners to hear the feedback, but level set. Some things we're going to be able to do right away, and it makes perfect sense, and boom, we're off and running. Other things you're going to bring up as feedback that are great, but there is zero chance in hell we're ever going to do that, right?
Right.
And then there's the other stuff in the middle where great idea, understand what you're saying, we're going to get there, but we're not going to be able to do it the way that maybe the competition's doing it or the way you would want us to do it, but we're going to check that off the box. And to me, as long as the lines of communication are open and your employees truly know that their voice is being heard because they see things changing and they see results from it, I think that goes a long way. And I'm not so sure every manager or all organizations function like that, right? I think that's the secret sauce that a lot of good managers, and I'm not saying I'm a good manager by any stretch of imagination, but managers that I've worked for, companies that I've worked for, people that I've shared, a lot of long hours with, I think the good ones know that it is about their employees. And that's where the talent is. And that's where all the knowledge is. Like, who better to tell me as a leader of the third party origination channel at Flagstar, things that are going wrong and areas of improvement than my AEs. They're the ones dealing with the client who are dealing with the borrowers. Why would I think I know best just because I have a title behind my name? That's crazy, right? And I think those are things that, like, people need to kind of look in the mirror sometimes and not get enamored with their compensation or their title or their responsibility, and remember what got them to the point in their career that they are. And I think those are things that can go a long way for people.
No, that is such a great way to kind of tie all this up, because the biggest thing I heard was everything about open door and everybody being able to be fully collaborative, and it's an open environment for communication. But none of that matters unless there's follow up with action. And you and I have worked together on strategic growth over the years, and you've heard me many times say on opportunities we've discussed, you'll give me a debrief and I'll say, what's the action?
Yep.
Now, it reached a point where I never had to ask you anymore because you knew I was going to ask the question. So you would tell me what is the action. And I do think that's something that we all drop the ball on from time to time. We hear ourselves speak, but there is no shared action, shared follow-up that then builds that trust to put the group in a position to know that even on a bad day, I'm not questioning whether I'm with the right group or not. And and that's kind of what you just tie together. Let's wrapping things up.
Yeah.
Anything you want to get off your chest? Anything that's been on your mind that you see happening, or anything? I mean, there's so much going on in this business right now, man. I smile a little bit when I see the brokers are better t-shirts, and by the way, I got no problem with it, but it's there's some fun competition that's been going on for a little while now, and lots of dynamics. I'm not suggesting we talk about that, but anything that's on your mind that you want to get off your brain or off your chest?
No, look, I think I'll tell you this, Levin, and it's not so much about like mortgage specifically, right? I think you and I know each other pretty well, and this isn't going to shock you what I say next, right? But I think the way I look at things is probably a little bit different than other people, right? Like, at the end of the day, I think we wake up every day and we have a choice, right? And I've done it at every company I've been at. I'm ingraining it in Caliber ingrained it at Caliber when I was there. I'm ingraining it in Flagstar here. I tell it to my wife and daughter all the time. It's funny, this will lead into it. So my best friend, we've known each other since we were 5 years old. I talk to him every bit as much as I talk to my wife, if not more. He's self-employed. He owns his own company. And I texted him this morning out of the blue because we've had some conversations, and I just kind of like, he seems a little off to me, right? So I texted him and I said, just something simple. Hey, morning, brother. Have a great day. That was it, right? And he was like, you too, brother. Thanks for the pick-me-up. And then this is what I said to him. I said, all about the two things that no one can take from you and shouldn't be able to influence, which is every day you wake up and the attitude and effort that you bring to the day are yours and yours alone. And he wrote, yep, today I'll be submitting a big proposal, the biggest proposal I've ever written, blah, 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 consulting gig. I don't expect to land it, but keep my fingers crossed, just be good at the dance. So I wrote, that's bullshit. Why do you have the attitude that you don't think you're going to land the contract? Screw that. Go write the best proposal you've ever written. Show them the value that you bring to the table so they're forced to say yes to you. And he wrote, I'm working on it. He goes, you must have had spidey sense. You always know the right time to shoot me a text to keep me going. And I said, well, that's because I've had a camera on you since we were 5 years old. But anyway, I was joking around about that. But that's kind of how I live my life, man. It's attitude and effort. And I really believe those are two things that as a human being, you're in control of. And if you let other people influence that, shame on you, right? Shit's going to go wrong. You're going to have a hiccup, whatever, insert whatever. Right now, appraisal is the hot topic in the industry, right? Because turn times are extended. They're asking for, ridiculous upcharges on all these assignments. Now you're starting to see the craziness in people, contract prices, whatever, $550. appraiser doesn't even want to take the assignment because they know the comps only support 400 and they know like the back and forth that's about to happen. But why do you let that bring you down? Right? Like at the end of the day, A, it's not personal. B, it's part of the industry. C, nothing ever goes off without a hitch. But I think the attitude that you bring to that goes a long way in solidifying relationships and the effort that you put forward. So I know you kind of asked anything that's on my mind. That's on my mind today, right? Because to me, why do you let other people influence you, right? At the end of the day, your attitude, I tell my daughter, you said I have a daughter, she's 19, she's a freshman in college, right? And to your point, they're going through things that, you and I and people watching this have never gone through because of this damn thing and all the technology in their hands.
Right.
And they can get, stuff's going on you and I don't even know about as a parent, right? But that's kind of what I'm teaching her is like, hey, don't let this kids bring you down. Don't let them talk about you like that. Just because you didn't get 100 likes on something you post doesn't mean you're not a good person, right? At the end of the day, your attitude and your effort. So I would tell you as a wrap up, that's kind of where my head's at on like things that I think about on a daily basis.
No, I love it. That's a drop the mic moment. And especially, one of my biggest takeaways, and it's something I know is a weakness of mine and I could be better at. And that is good leaders feel compelled to send text messages like that for a reason. You've learned it. It just happened. You weren't doing this when you were 25 years old. You might probably weren't doing it when you were 30 years old, but you feel compelled to send that text. You feel compelled to make a phone call to one of your account executives. You feel compelled to reach out to an underwriter for some reason. And there's a reason for that. Good leaders do it. You're a great leader, John. Hey, thanks for coming on the walk. I think we might have I think you may have tied Ken Perry's record for the longest walk podcast. We're going to be close. I'm not splitting this one up into 2 episodes though. This is great, John. So thanks for coming on, man. And we'll do this again down the road when we got some topics you want to bang around.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. Love what you're doing. And look, we've got a relationship going way back, but I love this stuff. So thanks for reaching out and inviting me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, bud. Be good, John.
Thanks, man. You too.